Hello again, gamers and gamettes, and welcome to another episode of Not So Hardcore Gaming. I'm your host, Jeremy, and today we'll be talking about two games. We do this every now and then because I'll come across games that don't necessarily have a story, so often there'll be a bit less to talk about, so I talk about two different games. So the topics of today will be SuperHot, Mind Control Delete, and Portal Bridge Constructor. So going into this, we'll start off with SuperHot, Mind Control Delete. Obviously this is just basically a sequel. There have been a few different SuperHot games. And for those who don't know what the game is, basically your character is fighting. It's a shooting game. First person, but the twist, which is a very good game mechanic, is the enemies that you come across, when they shoot, the bullets travel very slowly, so it basically slows everything around you down so you can basically dodge the bullets and take them down instead. And again, that's it's a game mechanic I really love. And to set it basically, for my experience with it, before I ever played a SuperHot game, I came across one game which was for mobile games. I had it on one of my really old phones when I was quite a lot younger, and the game was called FZ9 Time Shift, and that was a game that followed this same game mechanic basically. And that particular game at the time, I think it came out approximately 6 months after the original SuperHot game came out. So it definitely was, SuperHot was the first to do it, as far as I know. But that's originally how I discovered the game mechanic, and at the time I really loved that game. I thought it was such a cool idea for a game, and it really worked well. So when I later found out about SuperHot, I really wanted to try it, I wanted to see what that was like. And so I've played a little bit of it on my PC some time back now, but recently I went and I was looking for a few new games, try something new, and I was looking for games which would be a smaller download. I live in Australia, we're known for our shit internet, so you often have to watch what you download if you're in a rural place, where I live right in the middle of nowhere, so we have very little internet to work with compared to what other people have. There are people who have unlimited Wi-Fi, that sort of thing. We don't have that luxury. But I was looking through and I found this, which was a fairly small game, and that's part of why I was extra excited, because I wanted to try it. And yeah, so that's just a bit of backstory for you. But without further ado, let's get into it. Starting off, as always, visuals and audio. Visually, this is a very simple game. It's not like a heavily detailed one. The enemies that you come across are these blocky... They're not really blocky, but they're definitely not smooth, and it's sort of in between. Where it's gives a vague surface of a circle for their head, for example, but it's got those blocky dimensions to it, like really old games you'd find on the PS1 or whatever, where it's... what it's going for, but it is far from detailed. That's what the visuals are for this. And that includes the enemies you come across, as well as other surfaces like benches that you come across. In certain arenas, there's one which is like the club, and so it's got big speakers, that sort of thing. All of them are very simple, and there are only really two colours you'd see, which is the white of the background and the red of the enemies, and maybe a bit of black or blue for the weapons. So visually, this is a very simple game, but it works. It really does. It's because it's supposed to be a smaller game, and if you went too detailed, there'd be a lot more that goes into it. And I'm pretty sure this is an indie game. It doesn't have that big budget behind it, so you can't expect too much. But for the style of game, I quite like the way it looks, just because I feel like it fits well. And as I'll often say that, it doesn't have to look really good. if it fits. And this fits, so simple can work, and for this one it does work. Not a hell of a lot to talk about. The audio, again, also very simple. There's not much audio at all. You've got a little bit of narration where they say super hot, like that. That's just about all the voices you'll hear in it. You have the weapon sounds, and there are quite a few different weapons. You've got different types of guns. You have a katana. You can throw darts at people, which is really fun. So you've got a few of them, and there are just enough sounds for them to sound different. But again, they're very simple. And then the other thing is there's a little bit of music here or there and one of the details I found quite cool is one of the stages that you have for a battle is the club, basically. And when you go into that stage, the music goes really loud, as if you're inside a nightclub. So that was just a nice little detail, but that's one of the only times you'll hear any music with it. And then the sound you'd hear the most is basically a sound of that they make when words come on the screen to communicate with you. So in terms of visual and audio, there's not a hell of a lot, but honestly I don't mind. I really don't. Moving on past that, there's not really much of a story, and it will communicate with you, the game, in a way. So it will communicate a little bit of knowledge from what the game would be, where you're being controlled by someone, you're trying to take down whatever, or stuff like that. It's very simple, and there's very little that it will tell you, but it gives you enough that people are able to speculate, and it gets people talking about it. But there's not a lot to give you. There's really not much at all. So that's part of why this episode was going to be shorter, is there's just very little to talk about on that aspect of things. The gameplay is pretty good, actually. I love the concept of it, and it is done very well. You can dodge past bullets, and you can throw weapons at people to stun. When you fire, as soon as it exits your weapon, it will actually slow down, which is another cool detail for it. And if you move, everything will speed up. It's done quite fluidly. It's really designed quite well, and it just feels good to control. It feels good. There's not a heck of a lot in terms of it until you get past the first little bit of the levels. Now, the bit that I guess is lore based is very short. You've got a couple ones, then you go and you finish a level, and then there's a guy sitting down on the computer, and you have to kill him, and that's basically the end of the story, quotation marks. And then you go past, and then it introduces a whole new part to the gameplay. You go past there, and then it starts giving you, it calls them hacks, but they're basically upgrades. So you can go through and experience the gameplay again without any lore significance. But then, for example, you can get more lives. You usually have 3 lives. If you get hit 3 times, you need to start right from the start. Which, you'll have, for example, 6 different stages that you have to play through. And that's one chapter, is the easiest way to explain it. If you lose all 3 lives, you have to start that chapter again. And then after every 1 or 2, you can get an upgrade. One will be, it will heal your hearts, or gives you more life. And then in other cases, it will give you a starting weapon. That sort of thing. So you get upgrades, and then you get more simple ones. You unlock a new weapon or whatever else by playing through. So even though at first it will say basically, well, that's the end of the story, it's technically not even then. But you go in, and I remember saying to myself, is that it? But then no, there's actually a lot more to play, and there is a lot more that goes into the gameplay after that. So there's more to experience than you'd expect, and I've been really enjoying it. So the game is very well done, especially considering it doesn't have a big studio behind it, but everything they put into it just works. Now, I don't know exactly how many games they have been released just yet, but quite a few. And that's pretty much most there is to talk about for this particular iteration of it, I guess. As I said, there's that simple touch to it, but it's not too simple. You know, when you come across a certain game, if it's too complicated, it's overdone. But if there's not enough to it, it's just not right. So, you know, it's sort of, it can be overdone and it can be underdone. This one would be closer to being underdone, but it's not suffering for it. It is one that I do recommend because I've had a lot of fun playing it. You know, and then one of the things that I like about it as well is after you complete a round, it will show you a replay where it puts it into full speed, which is something I wanted to mention. So it has that to it as well, so you get to experience it in full and it looks badass. So that sort of thing. As I said, there's quite a bit to experience with it without it being, you know, big budgeted and that. It's nice and small, but it gets the job done. It still is enjoyable. So I greatly recommend it. Now moving on to the next one, Portal Bridge Constructor. Now, this is one I remember hearing mention of, and that was about it. I didn't really know exactly what it was, but I got the chance to play it, and again, one of the appeals was this is a very small game, but you can get quite a bit of time out of it. And I've really enjoyed it so far. I played just enough to experience it and really get a lot of enjoyment out of it. So it's, again, it doesn't have much story, but it doesn't need to, you know. It's a fun time waster, and it brings you back into the Portal world. You have GLaDOS speaking to you, and, you know, you've got the same humour that comes with it. You know, you're working for a corporation, that sort of thing. It heavily implies that, but makes it comedic. So it has the same humour that I remembered Portal having. You know, Portal 2, I loved Portal 2. And you get that same feel while it being a completely different game. Like, it is really different and really enjoyable because it still reminds you of the original. So it's puzzle based, as I'm sure you can guess. You know, it's a 2D platform and you have to build a bridge from one side to another. That's how it will basically start off. And so you have to construct a bridge that will hold itself. You know, you have to use the right... You can have like cables holding up, or you can have scaffolding, that sort of thing. You know, you've got different ways you can do it, which can create the weirdest looking bridges. But it's simple enough while giving you freedom to add your own spice to it. And then after a few levels, it introduces the portals. So then, you know, you have to build a bridge from one portal and then to the exit there. You know, it just adds that spice to it. And then there are a lot of ways things can go wrong, and there are a lot of ways things can go right. So it's one that I just feel so free playing. You know, I can do anything in it. It's great. And as I said, it has that humour. The visuals are fairly simple. Again, like, you know, it's a 2D platform. There's only so much detail you can get, you know? And because it's quite zoomed out, you know, it can't be super detailed, but it's detailed enough. When you have GLaDOS speaking to you, often you'll see the signature look of her coming down, talking to you. It will have the word boxes. When you have the bridges, there's only a few different things that you have it. You know, you've got your rebar, you've got your bridge, like the bits you drive over, and the cables, and then you have the portals. And one thing I liked about the portals as well, in some of the levels there could be 4 different portals, And so it introduces them into different colors. It's not just orange and blue. So I like that detail. It doesn't have that much significance, but for me, it looked quite good. And yeah, so it's got just enough detail. And, you've got stick figures that will drive the forklift over the bridge, that sort of thing. As I said, there's not much need for really high detail for a game like this, so how can you expect it to be, That's how I always look at it. It doesn't need it. And it just looks good. It looks exactly how you would expect it to. It gives the Portal feel when you look at it, while being something completely new. A completely new experience. The gameplay... I love puzzle games. I've always loved puzzle games because they get your mind working. It can help you with creativity. As I said, you can build these bridges any way you want. So it really just gets the creative juices flowing. It gives you new ways to navigate around. You can choose what way to approach things. And there's 60 levels in total. And there could be 100 different ways you could do them. So there's a lot to experience for the game. You can get a lot of playtime out of it. So it's simple, but there is so much more to it. So I greatly recommend playing this as well. As I said, if you love a puzzle game, this is something for you. There's no story, and there doesn't have to be. But, you get the Portal feel, you have the same characters, same look to it, but it's just a whole new puzzle game. I know I'm repeating myself a bit here, but it's one I think that's just done perfectly. Definitely play it. As I know today's episode is a bit shorter, but these are just two games that I've only come across recently, and I've gotten to play and really, really enjoyed it. It's one of those things that both the games this week are simple, but they just hit different. And there are a few games I've spoken about over this past year which are small budget games. There's not lots of characters, there's not lots of story, but they're a good time waster. Human Fall Flat I mentioned. There's Human... No, hang on, I just said Human Fall Flat. You've got that. You've got just a few ones like that which you can play around the house. You can play with a couple family members, but they don't need to be these big grandiose things. Yeah, I love simplicity when done right. That's about all there is to say. For anyone who's here today, I really hope you'll join me for next week. Next week is going to be an extra long episode, because next week is 1 year since I started the podcast. It will be the 1 year anniversary at the time of posting it. And so I'm going to do a special episode where I'm going to go and rank every game I've spoken about this past year. It'll be a classic tier list. So, I'll tell you in order from the first episode I spoke about, Ascending. I'll say what tier they're in, and I'll explain why. So yeah, it's going to be a special episode, and it will be out Thursday next week, which will be the exact day since I've released my first episode. I really hope to see you there, and that's about all there is to say for this week. And yeah, it feels good knowing that it's been almost a year here, and I'm excited. I'm very excited for this next episode. I hope you are too, and I will see you then.